Hello, good morning students. Today I'll be taking a lecture on food toxicants, food processing and food preservation. The contents of today's lecture are, I would tell you about food toxicants which would include lathyrysm, aflatoxin, ergot, epidemic dropsy, endemic ascites, fusarium toxins, food preservation and food processing. So now we'll see what are foodborne intoxicants. We can classify them according to different headings like due to naturally occurring toxins in some foods, or due to toxins produced by certain bacteria, or due to toxins produced by some fungi. Then other than this, we have some chemical factors also, which we'll see in the next slide. First we'll see these three. So the toxins which are present in food, which are actually naturally present, they are lathyrysm and endemic ascites. Then due to toxins produced by bacteria, it is botulism and staphylococcal toxins. And then due to toxins produced by some fungi, that is aflatoxins, ergot and fusarium. Foodborne chemical poisoning could be seen in with heavy metals like we can see with mercury, cadmium and lead. Then we can see with oil and petroleum derivatives and solvents. Then at times we can see with some chemical like some chemicals from the packaged materials. We can see asbestos and pesticide residues. So all this could be uh, a part of your food. But today we'll just stick on with these few of these important food toxicants. Lathyrysm. Lathyrysm is caused by ingestion of Lathyrus sativus or the kesari dal. Locally it is known as Tiora dal, Lak dal, Batra, Gharas, Matra. So all these are different names of kesari dal. Kesari dal when dehusked, it looks very similar to our tur dal or the arhar dal which is usually had. So sometimes uh, it could be a contaminant in the tur dal also, because they look very similar. And what happens by ingestion of this Lathyrus sativus is it causes a paralyzing disease in humans and animals. Humans, it usually causes the neurolathyrysm, whereas in animals it causes osteolathyrysm. So this is a important thing. And in neurolathyrysm, what happens is it's a crippling disease of this nervous system, and it leads to a spastic paralysis of these lower limbs, and usually affects adults who mainly have this kesari dal. So if the diet contains more than 30% of this dal, and kesari dal being had for over 2 to 6 months, then it can cause neurolathyrysm. Now the problem of this lathyrysm is prevalent in Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Orissa, and it's also been seen in Maharashtra, West Bengal, Rajasthan, Assam, Gujarat. So these are all different places where you have this problem being prevalent. Now, again, in Madhya Pradesh alone, before few days, like before few years, we had seen around 25,000 cases in a place known as Reva, and around 32,000 cases in a place known as Satna. So you can just imagine that it has so much of prevalence, and it is a very important public health problem. But these days, slowly, because of health education or so many other factors, or maybe the law which is made of banning the crop, that the number of cases are coming down. Now the toxin that is involved is BOAA, that is beta oxalyl aminoalanine. So this is important. You should remember this even for your Viva and MCQs. So this can be frequently asked. Now about the disease proper, it mainly affects young men in the age group of 15 to 45. There are different stages of this disease. The latent stage, no stick stage, 1 stick, 2 stick, and the crawler stage. What happens in the latent stages? Usually the patient is apparently looking all right, And this is an important stage. If somebody is detected at this stage, then maybe banning or not eating the crop, then he could get back to normal. So in this stage usually he is looking healthy, but when he has physical stress he has some ungainly gait which is seen. Then coming to the no stick stage. In no stick stage, the patient usually walks with short jerky steps, and this is where most of the patients are identified. Then we have one stick stage where the patient usually walks with a crossed gait and he has a tendency to walk on his toes. There is muscular stiffness also seen. Two stick stage, the symptoms are actually more severe, and then you have the crawler stage. Finally, the erect posture is actually impossible. Prevention and control of latherism. So one important point about the toxin is it is crystalline and water soluble. So this property could be made use, and soaking it or by power boiling. Usually we can remove this because it is water soluble. So if it's so, the toxin gets separated and that water can be thrown away. So based on this fact, there are few methods by which we can remove the toxin, and then uh, by removing the toxin, what this would help in the prevention and control. Okay, not just removing, there are few other ways by which we can prevent and control latherism. Let's see what they are. The first one is vitamin C prophylaxis. So although they believe that latherism usually causes irreversible changes, but it's told that the damage could be repaired by daily administration of 500 to 1000 milligrams of ascorbic acid for a week, and by increasing the ascorbic acid diet, okay, or vitamin C in the diet of these patients with latherism. So this would be helpful. Next is banning the crop, though it is an extreme step, but it's not feasible in places where people eat or it's their staple crop and it's grown. So especially places like Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Orissa, Gujarat. So in these places it is difficult. So what are the other ways are removal of toxin? I told you because it is water soluble, you can remove it. Then the methods are the steeping method and the parboiling. What we can do in this first method is we can soak this pulse in hot water for more than 2 hours. Then the water is drained off, again it's washed with clean water and then dried and stored, and whenever needed it can be used. Next is the parboiling. Now soaking in lime water overnight followed by boiling. This is a method. Usually parboiling is even used for rice. By doing this, the toxin can be uh, removed or it's a detoxicating process. Okay, so the drawback with this is it destroys the trypsin inhibitors. In the steeping method, what happens? Most of the minerals and vitamins are lost. Next important is education. Once we make the like people aware, we tell them what exactly would happen by having this pulse for a long duration, then maybe people would uh, eat some other food, or maybe even the quantity would be less. Then coming to other approaches like the genetic approach, here it is a selective propagation of uh, some other species of this lathyrus which has less toxin. So that can be done. So these seeds could be easily got from Indian Agricultural Research Institute, which is in New Delhi. So this could be taken, and these grains could be used. Then another important thing is the socio-economic change. So overall, if there is development, then uh, maybe people would not have this grain, because usually the poor farmers, because it is cheap, they have this lathyrus. So if that is there, then maybe if the socio-economic change is there, then people may not consume this kesari dal. Aflatoxins. Aflatoxins are a group of mycotoxins produced by certain fungi, that is Aspergillus flavus and Aspergillus parasiticus. Usually this fungi infests food grains like groundnuts, maize, parboiled rice, sorghum, wheat, rice, cotton seeds. Okay. So what happens with this is it is a hepatotoxic and it's a very potent carcinogen. Now, this fungus usually infests these food grains if the moisture level is below 16 percent and the temperature is usually ranging from 11 to 37 degrees Celsius. So when this is there, these aflatoxin formation could be seen. So what could be done to control aflatoxin? So usually it is the storage of this food grains after drying. So I told you the most important point is the moisture and the temperature. So once we have dried and then the moisture content, if it is less than 10%, then it usually does not favor the production of aflatoxins. Once if you see these food grains being affected with any of these uh, fungal growth, or if you see any uh, uh, growth on it, then this food should not be consumed and it should be thrown immediately. And this awareness, this education should be given to people about the toxic effects when we ingest this food grain. So once if this uh, uh, awareness is being done, then people would definitely not uh, have these food grains that are uh, affected by aspergillosis. Okay. Then another important point, what you need to remember about aflatoxins before the prevention and control is that it was being seen that uh, the aflatoxin B1 was detected in samples of breast milk and urine that was collected from children suffering from this infantile cirrhosis. So this is one important point when it comes to aflatoxins. Ergot. So, uh, just what we discussed, aflatoxin was a storage fungus, but now ergot it's a field fungus, and usually it is caused by Claviceps fusiformis. So what happens is in this the food grains like bajra, rice, sorghum and wheat, they have a tendency to get infected during the flowering stages by the ergot fungus, that is the Claviceps purpurae. Okay. So what happens is the fungus grows as a blackish mass and the seeds become black and irregular and they are harvested along with these food grains. So once there is this consumption of ergot, that could lead to ergotism. And the safe limit to ingest this is 0.05 milligrams per 100 gram of the food material. And once this is ingested, that could lead to uh, a acute and chronic disease. So what happens in acute diseases? There is nausea, there is repeated vomiting, giddiness, drowsiness. At times it could even be fatal. And in chronic ergotism, there is painful cramps in the limbs. Sometimes it can even cause peripheral gangrene. So what can we do to remove this? So I've told you that the grain is different when it's infected with this claviceps or the this fungus. So at that time, because it looks different, that could be removed. So a simple hand picking method also can be used. And then the another important technique is flotation in 20% salt water. And then the air flotation technique. By these different techniques, this uh, uh, the grain which is infected with this fungus could be separated from the normal grain. So this could be used. Now, epidemic dropsy. So, about epidemic dropsy, it was seen that there was outbreak of this epidemic dropsy, and till 1926 it was not known that what was the cause until Sarkar told that it was because of contamination of this mustard oil with argemone oil. Then after that, we had different studies. In 1937, Lal and Roy, uh, and then uh, there were few other studies by Chopra et al. In 1939. They said they gave all these experimental proofs for the cause of this epidemic dropsy, and it was by Mukherjee et al. In 1941 that they isolated this toxic alkaloid, that is sanguinarine, from this argemone oil, and then they found out all the chemical formula and everything of this. What exactly this toxin does is uh, it interferes with the oxidation of pyruvic acid, which then accumulates in the blood. So you should know all this about the toxin. So it is the sanguinarine which is there in the argemone oil, and this argemone oil could contaminate the mustard oil. It could be in the mustard oil. And then another important thing about the toxin is it interferes with the oxidation of pyruvic acid and accumulates in the blood. Now we'll move forward and see what are the symptoms. So this this toxin, or you could say this disease, epidemic dropsy, is highly fatal with very high morbidity and mortality. It could be sudden, non-inflammatory bilateral swelling of legs is seen. It's often associated with diarrhea, dyspnea, cardiac problems, okay, cardiac failures could be there, and again mortality up to 50%. So it's very important for us to know about this disease. Now, how to know about the contamination? Okay, and very fun. Before we could go to this test for contamination, another important point is um, how this uh, the mustard oil and the argemone oil means what is the actual reason for this contamination is what happens is these seeds like this contamination could be accidental or it could be deliberate. The seeds of these argemone mexicana, okay, also known as the prickly poppy, they closely resemble the mustard seeds. And what happens, plant this plant, that is the prickly poppy, it's widely grown in India. It has prickly leaves and a bright yellow color flowers. Now, usually this mustard crops, they are gathered in March, and it's at the same time when these argemone seeds get mature. And sometimes when they are harvesting mustard, so they could harvest even the prickly poppy. So this could happen that by mistake this seeds could get mixed with the mustard seeds, but some people do it deliberately for profit. Now, coming to the tests for contamination, there are two important tests, that is the nitric acid test and the paper chromatography test. Now about the nitric acid test, what happens is in the nitric acid test, you can we need to add this nitric acid to a sample of oil in a test tube, and then it is shaken. If brown to orange red color is seen, then it tells us that this argemone oil is present. Now, uh, this is usually present when the argemone oil content is more than 0.25%. Coming to the next test, that is the paper chromatography test. It's most sensitive test which is there at present. Okay, so it can detect argemone oil up to 0.0001%. So you can see it's so sensitive. This is a most sensitive test I told you. Now moving on to endemic ascites. So the cause is by having this millet known as gondli or the Panicum millare. If it's contaminated with the Junjunia seed, that is Crotalaria, okay, which contains the pyrrolizidine alkaloids, which are hepatotoxic. So what happened was, in a particular Kusmi block of Sarguja district in Madhya Pradesh, it was seen in 1975 and again in 1976 that there were outbreaks which had ascites and jaundice. Usually it was seen in this Nagasia tribals, and it was affecting all sexes, all age. Only the infants were spared, and overall again this disease had a very high mortality. And then it was founded when studies were done by NIN. It was founded that it was this millet of Gondli that was had by those people there, or the tribal in that area, and that was contaminated by this Junjunia seeds. The preventive measure would be educating these people about uh, this this toxin, means about these Junjunia seeds which could contaminate the Gondli grain. So the another important point would be de-weeding of these Junjunia plants which grow along with the millet that is there. Okay, so this is one important point. And another important point is this Junjunia seeds are much smaller. So by sieving also we can remove these Junjunia seeds. So this would lead to, among all this, the most important one would be educating people. Once they know that this grain is not fit, it has this certain side effects. So then people will become aware and they will do all these control measures. Fusarium toxins. Now about fusarium, it is this fusarium species of fungus which contaminates these crops. Usually the sorghum is most commonly affected. Rice also could be affected. Work is in progress by the National Institute of Nutrition to isolate the toxic metabolites of this fusarium incematum. Our next topic for today is food processing. So, in food processing, it is a set of technique which is used to transform raw ingredients into food, or to transform food into other forms for consumption. It can be done either at home or by the food processing industry. Now, aim of this food processing is, overall it improves the taste, flavor, texture, the storage capacity of the food. So it makes food more attractive and it increases the shelf life of the food. So the processed food is usually used in special situations, like uh, while on travel, or maybe um, on ships or air travel, so space travel. So all these special situations, the processed food is more suitable for them to take. Then processing can even help to remove certain toxins in food. Then it eases marketing and distribution. So this is also a very important point. So the marketing and the distribution of food, uh, usually. So if sometimes you want to distribute food, so processing would make it more easy. It increases the seasonal availability of these foods, and sometimes even extra nutrients could be added to uh, food by food processing. Now, few examples being parboiling. Parboiling, nutrient loss is usually minimized by this technique of parboiling. It's usually done in rice. So we have just now seen, even in lactalism, to remove the toxin, we are using parboiling. Then we have parching and the puffing. Here cereals are moistened, then heated. While heating, the escaping water causes the grain to swell, and in by this process usually lysine is lost. Another very important food processing technique is the sprouting and germination. Pulse grains are moistened and stored in a wet condition for around 24 to 48 hours. Then the grains sprout. Vitamin C is increased 10 times. Thiamine, riboflavin, and niacin are almost doubled. Even the iron availability is increased. Fermenting. The microorganisms multiply under the processing conditions. Example, curd from milk, rice and urad dal for idli. Usually this method doubles the thiamine, riboflavin and niacin. Liming another important method. Your introduction of lime in foods like butter, milk, rasam, fermented mixtures, it prevents destruction of thiamine and riboflavin. Dehydration. For example, removal of moisture from fruits, chilies, preparation of milk powder from milk. So in all this, dehydration would help. Chilling and refrigeration could be used for storage of fruits and vegetables. It prevents the growth of pathogens, and heating is another example where pasteurization of milk being an example. Though pasteurization is done, but there are few spores which could be resistant to heat. Smoking of food could also be done to store the food for a longer duration. Canning and then irradiation are few other examples. So hot food is put inside the can and again heated. Then the can is sealed and made airtight. In irradiation, UV rays are used on fruits and vegetables, and then this could increase the keeping quality of these fruits and vegetables. Few other examples of food processing are peeling and skinning, usually done for fruits and vegetables. Chopping or slicing could be done again in fruits and vegetables. Mincing is done, puring, liquefaction, baking, cooking, and frying. So these are few examples of food processing. Grilling, boiling, pasteurization, carbonation, packaging, sauce and ketchups, wines, brewing, freeze drying, jams and jellies. These are few other examples where food processing is used. Now disadvantages are can sometimes lower the value, the nutritive value you can see of foods could be lowered by using these techniques of food processing. Sometimes it could be unhealthy to use this food processing. Uh, Good examples being that some foods are they give empty calories. Okay, they are usually known as the junk food. So food processing can even um lead to these. Usually, you get these empty calories by having such kind of foods, and sometimes the food processing procedure as such. Okay, the food processing can increase the cost of that food. Food preservation. Now, food preservation is necessary because food is liable for spoilage due to the action of microorganisms. Usually, the molds, yeast, bacteria, they can all spoil the food, and again by insects and enzymes. Examples being aspergillus flavus on groundnut, they produce aflatoxins, and consumption of this could lead to aflatoxicosis, which we have just seen. Then yeast on fruits, it could convert sugar into alcohol and carbon dioxide. So this could happen. Anaerobic bacteria, they could spoil the tinned food. Then aerobic bacteria, they could spoil milk, um, and other non-vegetarian sources or certain vegetables. So all these could be spoiled by this anaerobic bacteria. Now, objectives of food preservation are it to preserve the nutritive value, to prolong the life of this food. They make food available in off seasons also. They add variety to preparation. They can avoid wastage of food. They can save time in procurement. So these are the important objectives of food. Now, principles of food preservation being maintain total asepsis, prevent entry of the organism by airtight packages, then make liquids free from bacteria by filtration through porcelain filters. So this could be done. Then destroy these enzymes by blanching, that is by using this pasteurization techniques. Then destroy pathogens by irradiation of fruits and vegetables. So all these are the important principles of food preservation. Now, methods of food preservation. We have natural food preservation, where we use salt, sugar, lemon juice. So all this could be used. Then we have antioxidants. Here we can use uh, like vitamin C, vitamin E, and butylated hydroxyanizole. So this could be used. The other important ones being antimicrobial and irradiation. So this is a table where which shows commonly used food preservatives. We have certain antioxidants and other preservatives. Antioxidants important, I told you, ascorbic acid, tocopherols, okay, and this uh, BHA or butylated hydroxy uh, toluene. So all these are important and they are usually used in these different food items. That is, ascorbic acid could be used in beer, soft drinks, fruits. Okay, so this is there. Then tocopherols could be used in vegetable oils. So all these are the different antioxidants. Then sorbic acid, acetic acid, lactic acid, propionic acid, benzoic acid, sulfur dioxide, nitrites and nitrates could again be used to preserve all these different food articles which is being given here. Now, to summarize the topic, we have seen today the food toxicants. We have seen these different kinds of food toxicants. We discussed about latherism and epidemic dropsy and all these. Other than these food toxicants, we have seen the food preservation and the different food like in preservations we have again classified them and seen all that, and other than that the important part is the food processing. So with this we have covered this topic of nutrition. Thank you.